A Human's Courage Against Alien Cruelty HFY Sci-fi Short Story. When a young woman is taken captive by a ruthless alien empire, she faces cruelty meant to break her spirit. But even in chains, she refuses to surrender. This is the story of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable spark of humanity that turns despair into defiance. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more narrated sci-fi stories that remind us why humanity endures, even among the stars. The first sound she remembered was the hum. A low vibration that never stopped, thrumming through the walls of her cage, seeping into her bones until it became part of her heartbeat. The ship was alive with it, the alien engines burning endlessly across the stars. Elara pressed her forehead against the cold metal bars and tried to breathe slowly. The air was thin, tainted with a chemical sting that made her throat ache. Around her, other cages stretched down the length of the cargo bay, hundreds of them, filled with beings dragged from their homes. Some huddled in silence. Others whimpered softly, their voices broken by fear. The aliens had taken everything from them. Elara had been a teacher once, on a colony that now existed only as ash. She could still see it if she closed her eyes, the children running through sunlit courtyards, their laughter echoing between white stone walls. She remembered her brother's voice, teasing her as he carried baskets of fruit from the market. She remembered music at dusk, when families gathered to sing as the sky faded violet. All gone in a single night. The aliens had come without warning. They descended in ships shaped like blades, cutting the sky open, spilling fire. Their soldiers marched through the streets with whips of light, dragging the living from their homes. The old were executed. The young were chained. Elara had been beaten, bound, and thrown onto a transport before she could even scream her brother's name. That was weeks ago. Or maybe months. Time no longer made sense here. The aliens called themselves the Vedrak. They were tall, angular creatures with glimmering armor that seemed grown rather than forged. Their faces were hidden behind masks of bone-white plating, but their voices carried cruelty in every word, every sneer. To them, the prisoners weren't people, they were property. Slaves. A scraping noise broke her thoughts. One of the Vedrak guards stalked down the row of cages, its clawed feet clicking against the metal floor. It carried an electrified staff, tapping it against the bars as it passed. The sound was sharp, deliberate, meant to remind the captives of who held power. The alien stopped before Elara's cage. She kept her eyes down, but she could feel its gaze on her, heavy and mocking. A gloved hand reached through the bars and seized her chin, jerking her face upward. "Human," the voice hissed through the mask's filter. "Still breathing?" Elara clenched her teeth, refusing to answer. She had learned quickly that silence was safer. Words only invited cruelty. The alien chuckled, a harsh, mechanical sound. "You last longer than the others. Strong flesh. The markets will pay well for you." It released her with a shove, and she stumbled back against the wall of her cage. The guard lingered for a moment longer, as if savoring her fear, before moving on. Elara curled into herself, trembling, but not from weakness. From anger. The kind that burned low and quiet, hidden behind her ribs. She had seen the others beaten into obedience. She had seen hope bleed out of their eyes. And she had promised herself she would not let that happen to her. Not yet. Not ever. Her hand drifted to her wrist, where the shackle rubbed her skin raw. A small scar there reminded her of home. Her brother had once carved a pattern into her bracelet, a sunburst etched in metal. She had worn it every day until the soldiers ripped it from her arm. Now, only the scar remained. It was enough. When the engines hummed again, she whispered to herself, so softly no one else could hear. "I'm still here." The ship carried them deeper into the void. She did not know where they were going or what fate awaited them. But she knew this: the Vedrak could chain her body, starve her, beat her. They could not take her will. Not unless she let them. The ship descended with a thunderous shudder, and the hum that had haunted Alara's dreams finally fell silent. For a moment, she almost wished it would return. The stillness felt heavier than the noise. Then came the hiss of airlocks and the clamor of boots. The cages opened, one by one, their seals releasing with metallic clicks. Vedrak guards barked orders in a guttural tongue, forcing captives into lines. Shock staves cracked the air, and screams followed when prisoners moved too slowly. Alara staggered forward when her door swung open. Her legs ached from weeks of confinement, but the push of a staff against her back left her no choice. The guards herded them down a ramp into blinding light. She squinted, tears stinging her eyes as the world revealed itself. They had arrived on a planet, or perhaps a moon. The sky was a dull gray, a perpetual twilight, choked with clouds that swirled around jagged spires of stone. Massive structures jutted from the ground like black teeth, fortress-like and alien. At the heart of it all rose a citadel of obsidian metal, its towers twisting toward the heavens like claws trying to tear the sky apart. The air reeked of ash and iron. Alara stumbled on uneven ground, her bare feet scraping against black stone. All around her, the other captives shuffled forward, humans, yes, but also dozens of species she had never seen before. Creatures with feathered skin, translucent eyes, or curling horns. Some were little more than children. All wore the same expression, despair. They were marched into a courtyard before the citadel, a vast square lined with banners of bone-white fabric streaked with black symbols. At the far end, a raised platform loomed, draped in chains. The crowd of guards and overseers that awaited them was silent as the prisoners were forced to kneel. Silence that pressed like a weight on Alara's chest. Then a figure emerged. The Vedrak commander was taller than the others, his armor gleaming obsidian-edged with silver. His mask bore not one but 3 jagged ridges, marking rank. He carried no weapon, he didn't need one. His presence alone demanded obedience. "Welcome," his voice boomed through the translator implants forced into every captive. "You stand in the heart of Vedrak Dominion. Here, your lives belong to us. Your bodies will serve. Your spirits will break. This is the law of the strong." The crowd of guards struck their staves against the ground in unison, a thunderous crash of sound. The commander's gaze swept over the kneeling captives. "But first, you must learn what disobedience brings." He gestured. 2 guards dragged a prisoner onto the platform, a young male, trembling, his eyes wide with terror. Alara recognized him. He had been in the cage across from hers, a quiet boy who couldn't have been more than 17. "No," Alara whispered, her stomach twisting. The boy begged in a language the implants couldn't translate. His voice cracked, desperate. But the commander only raised a clawed hand, and the guards activated their staves. The boy convulsed as arcs of electricity tore through him. His screams echoed against the stone, raw and unending. The crowd of captives shrank back, but the guards forced them to watch. Alara bit down on her lip until she tasted blood. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. Her nails dug into her palms, every instinct screaming to help, but she was powerless. Finally, the boy collapsed, smoke rising from his body. Still alive, but barely. The commander spoke again, his voice calm, almost mocking. "This is mercy. Mercy, because he will still serve, though his body is weaker. Defy us again, and mercy will not be given." He turned, his mask angled toward the rows of captives. "Obey, and you will live. Resist, and you will suffer." The guards released the boy onto the ground. He lay there, unmoving, until 2 others dragged him away. The silence that followed was suffocating. Alara's breath came ragged, her chest burning. Rage boiled inside her, hot enough to choke her, but she forced it down. She could do nothing here, not yet. To lash out would mean death, and death would serve no one. But she memorized the commander's voice. She memorized the rhythm of his words, the arrogance dripping from them. She memorized the faces of the guards who had laughed as the boy screamed. She would not forget. The captives were herded into barracks, long halls of stone filled with rows of iron bunks. Chains were fastened to their wrists, giving them only enough slack to move from bed to workstations. Guards patrolled constantly, their staves buzzing with lethal energy. The work began immediately. They were forced to haul blocks of stone, to dig through ash for minerals, to repair the fortress walls. The labor was endless, designed not to build but to break. Food was scarce, little more than tasteless gruel shoveled into bowls. Water was rationed. Ilara's muscles screamed with every movement. Her hands blistered, her feet bled, her body weakened, but her will endured. She learned to pace herself, to breathe through the pain, to keep moving when others collapsed. At night, she whispered words of comfort to the broken. She helped bandage wounds with scraps of cloth. She gave half her ration to those who could no longer lift their tools. And slowly, quietly, eyes began to turn toward her. Not with hope, not yet, but with something close to it. The guards noticed too. One in particular. He was larger than most, his armor scarred and dented from years of cruelty. He seemed to take special pleasure in tormenting the prisoners. He would strike without reason, drag captives into the courtyard and leave them bloody. And he had noticed Ilara. One evening, as the captives were chained in their bunks, he stopped before her. His mask tilted, studying her in silence. Then he spoke, his voice low and menacing. "You resist, human. Not with fists, but here." He tapped his claw against his mask where eyes would be. "I see it. You think you are strong." Ilara stared back, her throat tight. She said nothing. The guard chuckled, leaning closer. "I will enjoy breaking you." He walked away, leaving her heart pounding, her breath shallow. But even as fear twisted in her chest, another thought burned brighter. They had seen her courage. They had felt it. And that meant they feared it. The days bled into one another, each the same as the last. Work. Pain. Hunger. Darkness. The Vedrak designed it that way. To strip away time, to make life feel endless and meaningless, until even memory surrendered. But Ilara clung to memory. She clung to the sound of children laughing in the courtyards of her colony. She clung to her brother's teasing voice, her mother's hands weaving baskets. She whispered their names to herself when no one could hear, keeping them alive inside her. One night, as the captives returned from labor, Ilara noticed something. A woman, frail, her skin a pale gray unlike any human's, collapsed on the stone floor. She could not rise. A guard barked an order. When she didn't move, he struck her with the butt of his staff. The crack of bone echoed through the barracks. The woman cried out but couldn't stand. The guard raised the staff again. Ilara moved before she could stop herself. "Stop!" Her voice rang out, sharper than she intended. The barracks fell silent. Every prisoner froze, their eyes snapping to her. Even the guards paused in shock. The one with the scarred armor, the one who had promised to break her, turned slowly. The mask tilted, and she knew he was smiling beneath it. "You dare," he said, voice heavy with amusement. Ilara's pulse thundered in her ears. Her body screamed at her to kneel, to apologize, to make herself small. But something stronger held her upright. "She can't stand," Ilara said. Her voice trembled, but the words were steady. "If you kill her, you waste your labor. If you let her rest, she can work tomorrow." It was a dangerous lie, but it was the only weapon she had. The guard studied her for a long, agonizing moment. Then he laughed. A cruel, echoing sound that made her blood run cold. "You think like a slave already," he sneered. "But you still sound like prey." He struck her instead. The blow slammed across her cheek, sending her sprawling. Her head cracked against the stone floor, stars bursting in her vision. Pain burned down her jaw, blood filling her mouth. The guard leaned over her, pressing the humming end of his staff inches from her face. The electricity hissed, the heat searing her skin. "Remember this, human," he said. "Every spark you show, I will crush." He withdrew the staff, then barked an order for the others to drag the gray-skinned woman away. Elara was left on the ground, trembling, her cheek swelling, her vision swimming. But even through the pain, something strange stirred in her chest. The woman she had defended turned her head as she was carried past. Their eyes met, tired, broken eyes filled with something Elara hadn't seen in weeks. Gratitude. It was a small thing. A fragile thing. But in this place of cruelty, it felt like fire. That night, as the barracks sank into restless silence, a whisper reached Elara's ears. "You are not like the others." She turned. It was the gray-skinned woman. Her voice was weak, but her gaze was steady. They take everything," the woman murmured. "But not from you." "Why?" Elara swallowed, wincing at the pain in her jaw. "Because if they take everything, then we are already dead." The woman's lips twitched into something almost like a smile. She reached out, her fingers brushing Elara's arm. "Then maybe, not dead yet." Others nearby had heard. Elara felt their eyes in the dark, unseen but present. And she realized the truth, her words, her small act of defiance, had not gone unnoticed. They had lit something. A spark. The next day, the cruelty intensified. Elara was assigned to carry heavy loads far beyond her strength. The guards struck her for every stumble, every pause. They starved her, withheld water, mocked her with jeers. But she refused to bow her head. Every time she fell, she rose again. Bloodied, bruised, but standing. Other prisoners began to follow her example. They started helping one another when the guards weren't looking, passing water, sharing food, lifting stones together. Small acts of rebellion disguised as survival. And the guards noticed. One evening, Elara was dragged into the courtyard. The scarred guard shoved her to her knees before the other captives. "You think you inspire them," he growled. "You think your courage makes them strong." Elara's breath came shallow, her ribs aching from the day's labor. But she raised her head. She would not give him her fear. The commander appeared, stepping onto the platform. His presence sucked the air from the courtyard, his mask gleaming in the dim light. "This human defies us," he declared. His voice carried across the stone, sharp as a blade. "She spreads disobedience like a disease." The captives were silent, their eyes darting between Elara and the guards. The commander lifted a clawed hand. "Disease must be cut away." The scarred guard pressed the tip of his staff against Elara's chest. The hum vibrated through her bones. Elara clenched her fists, bracing for the pain. But then she looked out at the rows of captives. At their hollow faces, their empty eyes. And she thought of the boy who had screamed on this very platform. She thought of the woman she had saved, and the whisper of gratitude in the dark. If she was going to die, then she would not die silent. Her voice rose, hoarse but strong. "You can chain us. You can starve us. You can break our bones. But you will never own us." The courtyard rippled with gasps. The guards stiffened. The scarred one drove the staff harder against her chest, snarling. The commander tilted his head. Brave words. Worthless, but brave. Elara locked her gaze on him. Not worthless. Because they heard me. She glanced at the captives. And now they remember what you fear most. The commander's silence was worse than any strike. For a moment, Elara wondered if she had signed her death. Then he laughed, a low, mocking sound. "Let them remember," he said. "It will make breaking them more satisfying." He gestured. The scarred guard lowered his staff, striking her across the back instead. Pain flared, blinding, but Alara stayed on her knees. She would not fall. Not here. Not in front of them. When the guards dragged her back to the barracks, her body screamed with every step. She collapsed onto her bunk, too weak to move. But in the darkness, whispers spread. She stood. She spoke. She defied them. And for the first time since her capture, Alara saw not only despair in the eyes around her. She saw something else. Hope. Alara's body healed slowly. Bruises faded from purple to yellow. The swelling in her jaw lessened, though the ache lingered with every word. Her back bore fresh scars, ridges of pain carved into her flesh. But she was alive. And in the barracks, silence was no longer silence. Whispers filled the nights, soft, cautious, but insistent. Captives huddled close, sharing scraps of memory, fragments of songs, names of the worlds they had lost. They told each other stories of freedom, of families, of skies untouched by ash. It was dangerous. Guards prowled constantly. But still, the whispers grew. Alara became the center of them, though she had never asked to be. When she moved through the work lines, eyes followed her. When she was struck for faltering under her load, prisoners winced as if they, too, had been struck. And when she rose again, always rose again, they felt it. Hope was not yet strong, but it was alive. The Vaydrak noticed. The scarred guard grew more vicious, lashing out at any who lingered near Alara. Prisoners were punished simply for glancing at her. One evening, 2 men who had helped her carry a stone were dragged into the courtyard and beaten bloody before everyone's eyes. The message was clear: her defiance came at a cost. Alara's heart twisted with guilt as she watched them suffer. But when they were thrown back into the barracks, broken and bleeding, one of them lifted his head. His eyes found hers. And he smiled. Not a wide smile. Not joyful. But enough. Worth it, he whispered through cracked lips. The words burned brighter in her than any torch. Days stretched into weeks. The cruelty deepened. The commander ordered rations cut, forcing hunger into gnawing agony. Work doubled. Guards prowled with sharper eyes, waiting for the slightest excuse to inflict pain. But still, small acts of rebellion spread. A drink of water passed hand to hand. A fallen captive lifted to their feet. A chain deliberately tangled to slow the labor lines. And every act tied back to Alara, even if she never spoke. One night, as rain pelted the stone roof, the gray-skinned woman from before, her name, Alara had learned, was Sail, sat beside her. Sail's voice was faint, but steady. "They fear you," she said. Alara shook her head. "They don't fear me. They fear us. They know if we stand together, they cannot control us." Sail studied her with hollow eyes that now flickered with something brighter. "You speak like a leader." "I'm not," Alara said quickly. "I'm just, surviving." But even as she said it, she felt the truth pressing in on her. Survival was no longer enough. The breaking point came on a morning colder than the rest. The prisoners were lined up for labor when a child stumbled in the ranks. He was human, perhaps 10, maybe younger. Too small for the chains that weighed on his wrists. He collapsed onto the stones, gasping for air. The scarred guard towered over him, staff humming. "No," Alara breathed, her chest tightening. The guard raised the weapon. The boy cried out, curling into himself. Something inside Alara snapped. Before she could think, before fear could chain her, she stepped forward. "Stop!" Her voice rang across the courtyard, sharp and fierce. The guard froze, shocked. The other captives did the same. The boy stared up at her with wide, terrified eyes. The commander emerged from the shadows, drawn by the disturbance. His presence stilled the air. Elara forced herself to meet his gaze. He's a child. He can't carry the same load as the others. If you punish him, you gain nothing. The commander tilted his head, considering. Then his voice came, slow and cold. Then you will carry his load. Gasps rippled through the captives. Elara's heart pounded. Yes, she said without hesitation. I will. The commander's silence stretched like a blade. Then he gestured. The boy was dragged aside, and the scarred guard shoved twice the weight onto Elara's shoulders. The load was unbearable. Her legs trembled under it. Every step was agony, her back screaming with fresh pain. The guards jeered as she stumbled, striking her when she faltered. But she carried it. Hour after hour, through blistering ache, she carried it. And when at last the labor ended, she collapsed in the barracks, shaking and broken. The boy crawled to her side, tears streaking his dirty face. Why? He whispered. Elara looked at him, her vision swimming. Because one day, you'll be stronger than me. And when that day comes, you'll remember this. The boy clutched her hand, his small fingers tight. In that moment, she knew she had planted something deeper than hope. She had planted defiance. The fire spread faster after that. Prisoners began to take more risks. They sabotaged tools, spilled water into the dirt, and shared stolen scraps of food. They looked to Elara not just as a survivor, but as a leader. Even the guards sensed it. The barracks felt charged now, alive with tension, as if the air itself was waiting to ignite. The scarred guard grew restless. His strikes became more brutal, his laughter more unhinged. He wanted her broken, and soon. But every time he struck her, she rose. Every time he tried to silence her, whispers carried her words farther. And Elara began to understand, she was no longer surviving for herself. She was surviving for all of them. One night, as the barracks sank into uneasy sleep, Elara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Sale's voice broke the silence. You know what this means, don't you? Elara turned her head. What? Sale's eyes glinted in the dim light. They will try to destroy you. And if you fall, we fall with you. Elara swallowed hard. She had known it, deep down. But hearing it aloud made her chest tighten. I'm not ready, she whispered. Sale reached out, her cold hand covering Elara's. No one ever is. But courage is never ready. It only comes when it must. Elara closed her eyes, gripping Sale's hand. Fear pressed heavily in her chest, but beneath it burned something brighter. Not just defiance. Not just survival. Fire. The breaking came not with a blow, but with silence. One morning, the guards entered the barracks without their usual jeers. Their armor gleamed in the torchlight, polished to a mirror shine. They moved with an unsettling calm, as if rehearsed for something more than routine cruelty. The commander followed. His presence darkened the air, every step deliberate, every gesture a quiet command. The captives fell still, heads bowed, breaths shallow. Elara. Her name cut through the silence like a blade. Elara's heart stuttered. The sound of her name on the commander's tongue was wrong, intimate and poisonous. She lifted her head slowly, forcing her gaze to meet his mask. Come, he ordered. Two guards seized her arms, dragging her into the courtyard. The captives followed, herded at weapon point, until all stood beneath the pale glow of the alien torches. The commander mounted the platform. His voice carried across the stones, deep and sharp. Among you hides a sickness. A human who believes she is more than she is. Who dares to speak when silence is survival? Who dares to resist when obedience is her only purpose? Every eye turned to Elara. She stood in the center of the courtyard, her arms bound, her body aching from weeks of punishment. She believes she can inspire you, the commander continued. She believes she can give you hope. Today, I will show you the truth. He gestured. The scarred guard stepped forward, dragging someone into the courtyard. Ilara's breath caught. It was the boy. The one she had carried the load for. His wrists were bound, his face pale with terror. He stumbled as the guard shoved him to his knees beside her. No, Ilara whispered, her blood turning to ice. The commander's gaze never left her. You would sacrifice yourself for others. Admirable. But let us see if you will sacrifice others for yourself. The scarred guard raised his staff over the boy's head. The electricity hissed, glowing bright. Ilara, the commander said softly. Kneel. Submit before us. Swear loyalty to the Vedrak. Denounce your defiance. Do this, and the child lives. Refuse. The staff hummed louder. And his death will be your doing. The courtyard was silent. Every captive stared at her. The boy trembled beside her, his wide eyes fixed on her face. Ilara's chest heaved. The chains on her wrists cut into her skin as she clenched her fists. If she knelt, if she bent, she might save him. But the others would see. They would see her break. They would see her surrender. The fire she had lit would be smothered. If she refused, the boy would die. His blood would stain the stones, his screams echoing in her ears forever. Her vision blurred with tears. Her body trembled with fear. Her heart screamed both answers at once. The commander waited, savoring the weight of her choice. Kneel, he said again. Or he dies. Ilara turned her head slowly. The boy met her eyes, his small frame shaking. She wanted to tell him she was sorry. She wanted to tell him she would trade places with him in an instant. But his lips trembled as he whispered a single word. Stand. The sound was so soft, she thought she had imagined it. But his eyes, brimming with terror, held a spark. The same spark she had seen when he asked her why she carried his load. Stand. The word broke her heart and mended it at once. Ilara lifted her chin. Her knees shook, her whole body screamed at her to collapse, but she forced herself upright. I will not kneel. The courtyard gasped. The commander's mask tilted, studying her. You would choose his death. Ilara's throat tightened. Tears slid down her cheeks. Her voice cracked, but she made it steady. I do not choose his death. I choose our freedom. She looked at the captives, her voice rising. If I kneel, if I submit, then all of us are already dead. Hope dies. Defiance dies. And without those, we are nothing. Her voice trembled, but she forced every word past the ache in her chest. They can take our lives, she said, but they cannot take who we are unless we give it to them. The commander's silence was heavier than stone. He raised his hand. The scarred guard snarled and swung the staff down. No. Ilara screamed. The weapon stopped inches above the boy's head. Every captive froze. The commander lowered his hand, halting the blow. His voice was calm, almost amused. Interesting, he murmured. You would let him die, yet he still looks to you. You are dangerous, human. More dangerous than I imagined. He gestured, and the boy was dragged back into the crowd. Alive. Shaken, but alive. Ilara collapsed to her knees, the weight of relief and terror crushing her. The commander's voice rose again, sharp and cruel. Remember this, captives. She would sacrifice you all for her pride. She is no savior. She is your doom. But the words rang hollow. Because the boy, trembling and weak, looked at Ilara with something far stronger than fear. Admiration. And the captives saw it. That night, the barracks were alive with whispers. Not just whispers, murmurs of awe, of belief, of loyalty. Sail leaned close, her eyes glinting in the dark. You did not kneel. You did not break. Even when they gave you the chance. Elara buried her face in her hands. He almost died. I almost let him die. Sail's hand gripped hers. No. You showed us all that freedom is worth more than chains. Even he knew it. That is why he told you to stand. Elara's chest ached with guilt, but beneath it, the fire burned brighter. The Vedrak had tried to crush her. Instead, they had made her stronger. And now, she understood something terrifying and beautiful. She was no longer just surviving. She was leading. The days that followed were different. The barracks no longer felt like a graveyard. It breathed. It pulsed. Beneath the quiet shuffle of chains and the hum of alien engines, there was something alive now, something dangerous. The boy's whisper, that single word, stand, had spread like wildfire. Every captive knew it. Every captive repeated it when the guards were gone. Stand. It was no longer just Elara's defiance. It was theirs. Elara saw it in their eyes when they marched to the quarries, when they bent their backs under impossible loads. There was still fear, there always would be, but it was sharpened by something harder. Determination. The guards noticed. Their strikes became harsher, their patrols more frequent. But the captives endured. And for the first time, endurance didn't feel like surrender. It felt like preparation. At night, whispers turned into plans. Sail was the first to speak the word that none had dared before. Escape. The others fell silent, glancing toward the guards outside the barracks. Even saying it seemed like a crime. They'll kill us all, one captive murmured. They'll burn us alive before we take 2 steps. They already kill us, Sail hissed. Every day, every hour, with their chains and their hunger. Better to die fighting than to die rotting. The boy, his name was Kieran, Elara learned, sat beside her, his small hands clenched. I'll fight too. Elara looked at him, at the bruises still fading on his arms. You're too young. I'm old enough to carry chains, he whispered back. Then I'm old enough to break them. The word struck Elara like a blow. She looked around the dim barracks, at the hollow faces lit by faint torchlight, at the scars carved into every wrist and back. And she knew there was no turning back. If they stayed, they would die piece by piece. If they tried to escape, they might die faster, but maybe, just maybe, they would live free. Her voice was steady when she spoke. We'll need a plan. The plan grew slowly, in fragments whispered between work shifts and stolen glances. The quarries gave them stones, heavy, sharp, and plentiful. The guards didn't care if a prisoner stumbled carrying one. And so, here and there, a captive tucked a fragment away, hidden beneath rags or buried in the dirt until the time came. The kitchens gave scraps, tools too small to notice, bones honed to points, rusted spoons bent into crude blades. And Elara gave words. She didn't think of herself as a leader, but the captives looked to her all the same. She told them the truth, that many would die. That they might fail. But that every lash, every chain, every stolen life was already death. Better to choose our end, she whispered one night, than let them write it for us. Eyes hardened with resolve. The uprising was no longer a dream. It was a promise. But promises carried weight. And the Vedrak were not blind. The scarred guard grew restless. He struck at prisoners for no reason, tearing through the lines as if searching for something. His gaze lingered too long on Elara, suspicion burning behind his mask. One night, as the barracks settled into uneasy sleep, the commander himself stepped into the shadows. His presence froze every breath. He looked at Elara. She could feel it even through his mask, sharp, cutting, dissecting her. You believe yourself strong, he said, voice low. But strength is an illusion. It burns quickly. It leaves only ashes. He leaned close, his words dripping venom. And when you fall, your fire will consume all who follow you. Then he turned and left, leaving silence heavy as stone. Elara lay awake long after, staring into the dark. Fear pressed against her ribs, whispering that he was right, that her defiance would doom them all. But then she felt a small hand slip into hers. Kieran. His eyes were closed, his breath shallow with sleep, but his fingers clung to her as if he knew her thoughts. And Elara realized the truth. It was no longer about her. The fire belonged to all of them now. The first act of rebellion came quietly. A guard's water ration spoiled overnight. He drank, choked, and collapsed, his armor clattering as other Vedrak dragged him away. The captives never spoke of it, but their eyes met in the quarries with the faintest glimmer of triumph. The second act came bolder. A chain slipped during labor, crashing into a guard's leg. His scream echoed across the courtyard as he was carried off for treatment. The scarred guard punished the prisoners brutally, but still, the whisper spread. Stand. And then came the third. During rations, Sale deliberately dropped her bowl, shattering it across the stones. When the scarred guard moved to strike her, 3 others stepped between them. He beat them bloody, but the act was done. They were no longer breaking alone. Elara felt it building, day by day. The air itself seemed to tremble with it, a storm waiting for lightning. Every whisper, every act of defiance, every bruise carried with pride instead of shame, it was all leading to something inevitable. And she knew, deep in her bones, that when the moment came, it would be bloody. One night, she gathered those she trusted most, Sale, Kieran, the 2 men who had once smiled through their broken teeth after helping her. They huddled in the shadows of the barracks. It has to be soon, Sale whispered. The guards grow restless. They know something. Elara nodded. We strike when they least expect it. During transport, during labor, anywhere we can take them by surprise. Her eyes met Kieran's. Not you. You stay hidden. He glared at her, fire burning in his young face. I'm not hiding. You are the future, Elara said softly. If we fall, someone has to carry the fire. For once, he had no answer. The night before the uprising, sleep did not come. The barracks buzzed with tension, hearts beating like war drums. Elara lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain pound against the stone. She thought of her brother. Of her students. Of laughter and light swallowed by fire. She thought of the cage that had nearly broken her. And she thought of the word that had carried them here. Stand. Tomorrow, they would. No matter the cost. It began with thunder. Not from the sky, no, the storm was already spent, but from the clash of stone against steel. The quarries had always been a place of silence, the scrape of shovels, the grunt of strained bodies, the occasional crack of a whip. But today, the air shivered with something different. Every captive felt it. Every guard sensed it. The storm had arrived. Elara bent beneath the weight of another stone, her muscles screaming, her breath ragged. Around her, the others staggered in their chains, sweat slicking their faces, eyes darting toward one another. Waiting. The scarred guard stalked the line, his staff crackling in the pale light. He was more brutal than ever now, his suspicion sharpened to cruelty. His gaze lingered on Elara, as though he could feel the fire smoldering in her chest. He had no idea how close it was to burning him alive. The signal came not from her, but from Sale. A stumble, deliberate, her stone slipping from her hands. It crashed against the guard's foot with a bone-crunching thud. His roar split the air. He raised his staff to strike. And that was when it happened. A prisoner further down the line hurled his stone with all his strength. It smashed into another guard's helmet with a sickening crack. The alien staggered, stunned. The quarry erupted. Elara swung her own stone, slamming it into the scarred guard's arm. His staff flew from his grip, skittering across the dust. She lunged, grabbing it before he could recover. Electricity hissed in her hands. The prisoners screamed, not in fear, but in fury. Chains rattled as they tore free of the ground, wielding them like whips, like blades. Stones flew, shattering bone, denting alien armor. The guards faltered. They had never seen this before. The captives had always been silent, broken, obedient. But now they surged like a tide, their voices a thunderous roar of defiance. Stand! 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 The scarred guard lunged at Elara, claws outstretched. She swung the stolen staff with every ounce of strength left in her body. The crack of electricity split the air as it struck him across the chest. He convulsed, his scream choked and garbled, before collapsing into the dust. For the first time since her capture, Elara saw something new in the guard's eyes. Fear. The commander arrived within minutes, his presence cutting through the chaos like a blade. His armor gleamed in the sunlight, his movements calm, deliberate. The fighting stuttered as captives and guards alike turned toward him. He surveyed the scene, the broken helmets, the blood in the dust, the scarred guard writhing on the ground, and then his gaze found Elara. You, he said simply. Elara's chest heaved, the staff trembling in her hands. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But instead, she lifted her chin. This ends today. The commander tilted his head. Yes. It does. He raised his hand. From the cliffs above, reinforcements poured in. Dozens of guards, their staffs crackling, their armor glinting. The captives cried out as the circle tightened. For a moment, despair clawed at Elara's chest. They were outnumbered, outarmed, still chained. The uprising would be crushed before it truly began. Then a voice rose above the chaos. Kieran's. Stand, he screamed, his small body climbing onto the rocks so every captive could see him. His voice cracked, but it carried like fire through dry grass. Stand. Don't stop now. And something broke. The captives surged forward again, their fury drowning out their fear. They swarmed the reinforcements, dragging them down beneath a storm of chains and stones. The air filled with screams, with sparks, with the roar of bodies that had nothing left to lose. Elara fought like a woman possessed. Every strike of the staff burned through her arms, every breath tore at her chest, but she did not stop. She remembered her students, her brother, the lives stolen and burned. Each blow was for them. Beside her, Sail wielded a chain like a whip, tearing into alien armor. The men who once smiled through their broken teeth fought shoulder to shoulder, their laughter wild even in the chaos. And Kieran, too small, too fragile, darted through the fray like a shadow, tripping guards, hurling stones, shouting until his voice was raw. The commander watched. He did not move to stop them. He stood in the heart of the storm, calm and still, as if waiting for something. Finally, his voice cut through the din. Enough. And to Elara's horror, the guards obeyed. They fell back, forming a circle around the commander, leaving the prisoners panting, bloodied, but unbroken. The silence that followed was worse than the chaos. The commander stepped forward. His mask caught the light, cold and unyielding. You think yourselves free, he said softly. But freedom bought with desperation is nothing. You will break again. And when you do, it will be forever. He turned his head slightly. Kill one. A guard seized a captive at random, dragging her into the center. She screamed, thrashing, as the staff rose above her. No. Elara cried, surging forward. She slammed her staff into the guard's side, knocking him away. The captive collapsed, sobbing. Elara stood over her, chest heaving, eyes locked on the commander. If you want blood, she said, her voice shaking, take mine. The captives gasped. The commander tilted his head. For a long moment, he was silent. Then, slowly, he lowered his hand. "Very well," he murmured. The guards withdrew. The commander's gaze lingered on Alara a moment longer before he turned, leading his soldiers away. The uprising was not crushed. But it was not won either. The captives remained standing, trembling, bloodied, but alive. And for the first time, the chains on their wrists did not feel unbreakable. That night, the barracks were alive with murmurs. No one spoke of fear. No one spoke of death. They spoke of victory. Of standing. Sale leaned against Alara, her voice hoarse but fierce. "We did it. We fought. We showed them we are not cattle." Kieran sat at Alara's feet, his small hands still trembling, his eyes bright with exhaustion and pride. "We can win," he whispered. "I know it now. We can win." Alara looked at them, at the bruises and blood, at the fire that refused to die. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe it. The chains had begun to break. The barracks no longer slept. That night, when the guards locked them in and the alien patrol stalked the perimeter, the air inside the stone walls was alive. Not with fear, not with despair, but with something new. Something stronger. Hope. The captives sat huddled together, their bodies bruised and battered, but their eyes alight. They whispered about the fight in the quarry, replaying every moment as though it were a story told around a hearth. For once, the tale did not end in defeat. Sale grinned through split lips, her laughter ragged but real. "Did you see his face? The scarred one, when you took his staff? I swear he nearly pissed himself before he hit the dirt." The men who once smiled through broken teeth joined in, their laughter hoarse and wild. Even the old woman with the trembling hands allowed herself a smile. For the first time in months, maybe years, they were not slaves. They were fighters. Alara sat apart, her back against the wall, the stolen staff across her lap. The metal was still scorched from where it had struck the guard, faint sparks flickering in the dim light. She should have felt triumphant. She should have let the hope wash over her like the others. But instead, unease gnawed at her chest. The commander. He could have ended it. He had the power, the soldiers, the authority. Yet he hadn't. He had let her live. Let them all live. Why? She traced her thumb across the staff's handle, the hum of energy buzzing in her palm. The answer terrified her, because he was waiting. Waiting for them to rise higher, burn brighter, so he could crush them more completely. She pushed the thought down. There was no choice but to keep moving forward. They had shown they could fight. Now they had to prove they could escape. The next day, the guards were harsher. The captives were given less water, smaller rations, heavier loads. Every slip earned a blow. Every whisper risked death. But it no longer broke them. They bore the pain with clenched jaws and steady eyes. And in every glance, every quiet exchange, they repeated the word that bound them together. Stand. At night, the planning grew bolder. Sale drew rough maps in the dirt with a scrap of bone, marking the patrol routes she had memorized. The men described hidden cracks in the quarry walls, places where the stone was weaker. The old woman remembered overhearing guards mention supply depots near the southern gate. Kieran sat close to Alara, listening with wide eyes. His small voice piped up whenever someone dismissed him. "I can slip where you can't. I can hide where you're too big. Use me." Alara shook her head every time. "No. Not you." But in truth, she knew she couldn't protect him forever. The fire was in him as much as in any of them. Their first act of preparation was small, stealing food. 2 men feigned collapse in the kitchens, distracting the guards while Sale slipped scraps into her rags. It wasn't much. Just dried bread, a few strips of salted meat, but it was proof they could outwit their captors. The second act was riskier: water. During labor, Kieran darted from the lines, slipping beneath a trough before a guard's eyes could follow. He returned with a dented canteen clutched to his chest, his grin fierce despite the bruises blooming where the whip had caught him. The captives cheered quietly that night as they shared the stolen water. For the first time, their thirst was eased not by the hand of a master, but by their own defiance. And with each act, their courage grew. But courage had a cost. One evening, as they returned to the barracks, the scarred guard, his body still twitching faintly from the strike of Alara's staff, caught Sale's wrist. His claws dug deep into her skin as he dragged her into the courtyard. The others were herded inside, forced to watch through the bars as he raised his weapon. Alara's chest constricted. She gripped the staff tighter, her instincts screaming to run forward, to fight, but the commander stood nearby, silent and still, watching. The staff in his hand gleamed, and Alara knew, if she moved, they would all die. Sale met her eyes. For a heartbeat, her smile flickered. A small, defiant grin. Then the staff came down. Her scream split the night. When the guards finally dragged her limp body away, silence hung heavy in the barracks. Alara's hands shook so violently she could barely hold the staff. Guilt tore at her, guilt for not acting, for not saving her. But then she saw Kieran, his small fists clenched, his jaw tight, and she knew Sale's death had not been in vain. The fire burned hotter now. That night, they lit their first flame. Not a literal one, not yet, but a signal, a declaration. Alara stood in the center of the barracks, the stolen staff raised high. The captives gathered around, their eyes shining in the darkness. "They will kill us," she said, her voice raw but steady. "They will starve us, beat us, burn us. But tonight, we choose to fight. Not tomorrow, not in whispers, but soon. We rise together, or we die together. No more chains." Her words echoed through the barracks. "No more chains," the captives repeated, their voices a low thunder. Kieran climbed onto a bench, his small form silhouetted in the torchlight. His voice cracked, but it rang louder than them all. "No more cages. No more chains." The chant spread, growing louder, fiercer, until it shook the very walls. The guards outside shouted for silence, but none obeyed. For the first time, the night belonged not to the Vedrak. It belonged to them. The uprising had begun in blood. Now, it would burn in fire. The morning after Sale's death, the quarry was silent. Not the silence of obedience. Not the silence of broken spirits. But the silence of sharpened knives hidden beneath cloaks. The guards sensed it, they barked louder, struck harder, but the captives bore it without breaking. Something had changed. Alara moved through the day with her jaw clenched, her eyes hard. The scarred guard watched her with open hatred, but he no longer dared to step too close. His arm still twitched where she had struck him with the staff, a reminder that she was not as powerless as he believed. But Alara knew hatred was not enough. Courage was not enough. If they wanted to survive, they needed a plan. That night, the barracks became more than a prison. It became a war room. The captives gathered close, their whispers weaving a web of possibility. Alara stood in the center, the staff laid across her knees, listening as they spoke. "We strike the kitchens first," one man said. "The guards there are fewer. We can take food, knives." "No," another interrupted. "The southern gate. It's weaker. Less guarded at night. I've seen the shifts." Kieran's small voice piped up from the corner. "The watchtowers. They have alarms. If they call for help, we're dead before we reach the gate." Silence fell. Every idea was a risk. Every choice meant lives lost. Alara closed her eyes, remembering Sale's grin, the way she had whispered stand even as she bled. Sale had died because Elara hadn't moved fast enough. She wouldn't make that mistake again. She opened her eyes. "We need 3 things," she said, her voice steady. "Food, weapons, and silence. Without those, we don't live long enough to reach the gate." Heads nodded, eyes sharp with agreement. The food came first. 2 prisoners volunteered, brothers who had once been farmers before the war took their land. They knew how to carry weight without showing strain, how to hide more than their hands revealed. During labor the next day, they slipped scraps into their rags, burying them beneath dust and sweat. By nightfall, they returned with enough dried rations to feed a dozen for several days. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The weapons came second. The quarry was full of stone and iron shards, discarded tools and broken chains. The captives collected them piece by piece, hiding them beneath loose floorboards in the barracks. A jagged stone became a blade. A snapped chain became a whip. A sharpened tool became a spear. But the true prize was the staff. Elara spent hours studying it, running her fingers along the seams, listening to the hum of energy within. It was alien, alive in a way human machines were not. She didn't fully understand it, but she knew how to make it burn. And burn it would. The silence was hardest of all. Guards prowled constantly, their ears tuned to whispers, their eyes sharp for defiance. One wrong word, one careless glance, and the plan would die before it began. But the captives had grown clever. They spoke in fragments, weaving plans into ordinary conversation. A mention of water meant a meeting at the trough. A word about stones meant supplies hidden in the quarry. The guards heard nothing but despair. They never realized the storm was gathering. Kieran became their runner. Small, quick, and often overlooked, he darted between groups, carrying scraps of information like embers from one fire to another. His eyes shone with fierce pride every time he returned, his voice low with excitement. "They trust me," he whispered to Elara one night. "They think I'm harmless." "You're not harmless," she said softly, brushing dirt from his hair. "You're braver than any of us." He grinned, wide and bright, and for a moment she saw not the prisoner he had become but the child he still was. It made her chest ache. She would get him out. No matter the cost. Days bled into weeks. The plan grew sharper, clearer. On the night of the next storm, when the thunder drowned sound and the rain veiled sight, they would strike. The brothers would lead with the food. The men with broken teeth would wield the chains. Elara would carry the staff. And Kieran would run. The thought of sending him into danger twisted her gut, but there was no avoiding it. Only he was small enough to slip through the cracks, to climb the narrow gaps in the gate structure. He would carry the spark that opened the way. "Are you ready?" she asked him one night. His eyes were steady, older than a boy's should ever be. "I was ready the day they took my sister." Elara's throat tightened, but she nodded. The storm came sooner than expected. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, lightning tearing through the sky. The guards grumbled, drawing their cloaks tighter, their vigilance dulled by the downpour. Elara felt the tension in the barracks, the way every captive sat stiff, their hands clenched, their breath held. This was it. She rose slowly, the staff in her hands, its hum masked by thunder. "It's time," she whispered. The fire in the night had burned long enough. Now, it was time to break free. The storm tore across the skies like a wounded beast. Lightning split the heavens, jagged veins of white fire flashing against the black. Thunder rolled over the compound, shaking the walls, rattling chains. Rain fell in sheets, heavy and relentless, drowning the world in its roar. For the first time in months, maybe years, the guards looked uneasy. Their armor gleamed slick with water, their movements clumsy as the storm blurred their vision and muffled their orders. It was the perfect moment. Inside the barracks, the captives rose. Elara stood at their head, the staff gripped tight in her hands. Its hum resonated through her bones, a low growl beneath the thunder. Around her, faces once hollow with despair now burned with fierce resolve. Kieran slipped to her side, his small frame trembling, but his eyes steady. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded, his jaw clenched. "Ready." She pressed her forehead briefly to his, whispering words only he could hear. "Run fast. Run smart. Don't look back." And then the world erupted. The first blow fell silent beneath the thunder. A guard at the barracks door never saw the jagged stone until it split his mask. He collapsed into the mud, his staff falling from limp fingers. Another captive seized it, the weapon flaring to life with crackling light. "Go!" Ilara shouted. The barracks burst open. Prisoners poured into the storm, their chains now whips, their stones now blades. The guards scrambled to respond, their orders drowned by thunder, their eyes blinded by the rain. Ilara charged forward, the staff raised high. It roared with energy, striking the ground and sending sparks leaping through the water. 2 guards fell screaming, their armor shorting out in the flood. The captives surged behind her, a tide of fury and desperation. Kieran darted through the chaos, his small body slipping between legs, beneath fallen beams. He clutched a stolen dagger tight, though he prayed he would never have to use it. His goal was the gate, the cracks in the southern wall where stone met steel, where rain seeped through and rust gnawed at the hinges. The place only he could reach. The guards rallied. Blades of light cut through the storm, searing arcs that burned through flesh and stone alike. Screams tore the air as captives fell, their courage met with fire. Ilara fought like a woman possessed, every strike of the staff fueled by rage and grief. She remembered Sale's grin, the old woman's trembling hands, the boy who had whispered about his sister. Every memory became a weapon. Beside her, the men with broken teeth swung their chains, dragging guards into the mud. The farmers fought with jagged stones, their blows clumsy but driven by desperation. For every captive who fell, another rose to take their place. This was not survival. This was war. At the gate, Kieran reached the cracks. His fingers slipped on the wet stone, his breath ragged, but he climbed. Higher, higher, until the wall scraped his knees and tore his palms. At the top, he pressed the dagger into the weak seam where rust spread like veins. He drove it in, again and again, ignoring the sting of blood and the crack of thunder. The gate shuddered. But it did not break. Tears mixed with rain on his face. He struck harder, his small voice breaking into a scream. "Open! Open, damn you!" The scarred guard appeared. He moved through the storm like a predator, his eyes burning through the mask, his weapon raised. He had waited for this moment, waited for them to rise, so he could break them. His gaze locked on Ilara. Their eyes met across the chaos, lightning flashing between them. And then he came. The clash was brutal. His strikes were fast, precise, fueled by years of cruelty. Ilara blocked with the staff, sparks erupting as their weapons met. The impact rattled her bones, drove her to her knees, but she rose again, teeth bared. "You should have stayed broken," he snarled. She spat blood. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." Their battle raged in the storm, every strike echoing like thunder. Captives and guards clashed around them, but in that moment, the world narrowed to 2, one scarred by hate, the other scarred by loss. At the gate, Kieran gave one last scream and drove the dagger deep. The hinge cracked. Metal groaned. And with a sound louder than thunder, the gate broke. The storm rushed in, carrying freedom with it. "Kieran!" Ilara shouted, even as the scarred guard's weapon struck her shoulder, searing flesh. The boy looked back, rain in his eyes, and nodded. The way was open. Now, they had to survive long enough to take it. The gate groaned wide, a jagged wound in the compound's walls, spilling rain and lightning into the yard. For one heartbeat, the captives froze, stunned by the sight of their chance at freedom. Then chaos swallowed them whole. Guards roared commands, their voices distorted by the storm. Energy whips cracked through the air, searing prisoners where they stood. The mud ran red as bodies fell, and yet still the captives surged forward, eyes blazing, chains swinging like scythes. Elara fought in the heart of it, her staff clashing with the scarred guard's weapon in a furious rhythm that shook her arms to the bone. Sparks burst with every strike, thunder punctuating each blow. She tasted blood, iron, and rain mixing on her tongue, but she did not yield. The guard's mask glared down at her, scarlet light glowing through the cracks. "This is the end for you, human." Elara spat into the mud. "No. This is the end for you." With a roar, she swung the staff low, catching his legs. He staggered, but recovered instantly, slamming the butt of his weapon into her ribs. Pain lanced through her chest, but she gritted her teeth and struck back. Around them, the battle raged. The men with broken teeth dragged the guard down, smashing his mask to pieces with stones. The farmer brothers fought back to back, crude blades flashing in the storm. And Kieran, small, quick Kieran, darted among the chaos, dragging the wounded toward the broken gate, his face pale but unyielding. The captives were no longer prisoners. They were warriors, forged in chains, now burning in fire. The scarred guard pressed forward, his strikes relentless. Each blow came faster, sharper, forcing Elara backward step by step. Her arms screamed with the effort of holding him at bay. "You think courage will save you," he snarled, his voice distorted beneath the mask. "Courage cannot stop the inevitable. You are weak. All of you." Elara's vision blurred with rain and blood, but she held his gaze. "Maybe. But weakness doesn't sing. Weakness doesn't rise." She twisted suddenly, driving the staff into the mud. A burst of energy ripped through the ground, water exploding upward in a blinding spray. The guard reeled back, blinded for a moment. It was all she needed. With a scream, Elara swung the staff wide. It caught the edge of his mask, shattering it in a spray of shards. For the first time, she saw his face. A lattice of scars cut deep across alien flesh, one eye milky white, the other burning with hate. His lips twisted in a snarl as he staggered, half-blind, clutching at the ruins of his mask. And still, he fought on. At the gate, Kieran cried out. A bolt of energy had struck the wall near him, stone exploding. He clung to the edge, blood streaking down his arm, his small body trembling with effort. "Help him," someone shouted. But everyone was fighting. Everyone was bleeding. Elara's heart lurched, but she couldn't turn. The scarred guard pressed in, his blade of light inches from her throat. She could feel the heat searing her skin. It was then that one of the broken-toothed men barreled forward, chain wrapped around his arm. With a roar, he swung it across the guard's chest, pulling him back just long enough for Elara to breathe. "Go," the man shouted at her. "The boy needs you." Elara hesitated, just for a heartbeat. And in that heartbeat, the guard drove his blade into the man's chest. The chain slipped from limp fingers. Blood spilled into the rain. "No!" Elara screamed. But the man only grinned through bloody teeth. "Run, girl. Don't waste it." His body crumpled into the mud. And Elara turned, her breath ragged, her fury like fire. Kieran slipped, his hands raw and slick. His small body dangled from the broken wall, feet scrambling against stone. "Elara," he cried, his voice breaking in terror. She sprinted, mud flying from her steps, the staff blazing in her grip. Behind her, the scarred guard gave chase, his broken mask glowing faintly with crimson light. "Climb, Kieran," she shouted. "I can't." "Yes, you can." She reached him just as his grip failed. With a lunge, she caught his wrist, hauling him up against her chest. He clung to her desperately, sobbing, his tiny frame shaking. "I've got you," she whispered fiercely. "I'll never let them take you. Never." Behind her, the guard roared, raising his weapon. Elara turned, staff sparking with fury, her body shielding Kieran. The storm crashed above them, and the yard burned in fire and blood. The captives were still fighting, still dying. The farmers were down to one, his brother had fallen. The old woman had been struck, yet still she dragged others toward the gate. Bodies littered the mud, human and alien alike, each death fueling the other's rage. It was freedom, paid for one heartbeat at a time. And at the center of it, Elara stood against the scarred guard, lightning reflecting in her eyes, Kieran's trembling hand clutching her sleeve. The storm was their stage. The blood was their chorus. And the fire burned hotter still. The yard had become a graveyard. Rain pounded the mud until it was slick with blood. Bodies sprawled across the ground, alien and human alike, faces pale, eyes empty. The storm howled, drowning their screams, yet the fight did not stop. The living still clawed against death, against chains, against fate itself. And at the center of it stood Elara, her staff glowing white-hot, Kieran pressed to her side. The scarred guard loomed before her, his ruined mask hissing with sparks, his one good eye burning. His weapon hummed in the storm, each swing slicing through air heavy with rain. "You will not leave this place alive," he growled. "Not you. Not the boy. Not any of you." Elara's chest heaved, her body shaking with exhaustion. Every muscle ached, her ribs screamed where his blows had landed, but her grip on the staff did not falter. She pulled Kieran behind her, planting her feet in the mud. "Maybe not," she rasped. "But even if I fall, you'll never forget this night. You'll never forget that humans fought you in the storm." And with a roar, she lunged. Their weapons clashed again and again, sparks exploding in the rain. The guard pressed hard, his strikes calculated, merciless. Elara fought with desperation, her movements fueled by memory and rage, her brother's laughter, the old woman's trembling hands, Sale's grin. Every blow was a promise. Every strike was vengeance. Yet slowly, surely, she was losing ground. Her arms trembled, her vision blurred. The staff grew heavier with each swing. The guard was too strong, too precise. And then his blade struck true. It slashed across her side, searing flesh, driving the air from her lungs. She staggered, staff slipping from her grip. Pain flared white-hot, blinding her. Kieran screamed. "Elara!" The guard raised his weapon high, ready to end it. But before the blade could fall, a figure hurled itself into the strike. The second broken-toothed brother. The blade tore through him, a crackling flash of light. He collapsed in Elara's arms, blood pouring from the wound. His lips curled in a defiant grin, even as his life bled away. "Not today," he whispered. "Not her." And then he was gone. Elara choked on a sob, clutching his lifeless body, rage and grief twisting inside her. The guard sneered. "Another wasted life. Another fool who dies for nothing." Elara's head snapped up, eyes blazing. Her voice was raw, jagged. "He didn't die for nothing. He died so we could live." She seized the fallen man's chain, wrapping it around her arm. The guard raised his weapon again, but this time, when their weapons met, she held her ground. This time, she fought with every soul who had fallen. Behind them, the battle shifted. The old woman, bleeding from a gash in her shoulder, dragged the youngest captives toward the open gate. She pushed them through with shaking hands, her body shielding them from stray bolts of energy. "Run," she screamed, voice breaking. "Run while you can." Some obeyed. Some hesitated. The farmer, now alone without his brother, looked back at her. "Come with us." But she shook her head. "I'll hold them. You go." And then she turned, facing the charging guards with nothing but a jagged stone in her hand. The farmer wept, but he obeyed. He took the younger ones and ran into the storm. The old woman's cry of defiance echoed across the yard until it was drowned by silence. Elara saw it all, every sacrifice, every fall. Her chest burned with grief, but she did not falter. Her chain lashed out, striking the scarred guard across his scarred face. He staggered, and she followed with a strike of the staff, sparks erupting. "You want to break me?" she screamed, voice raw. "Then remember every name, every face, every human who refused to bow." The guard roared, lunging forward. Their weapons locked, rain pouring over their straining forms. It was not skill that kept her standing now. It was fury. It was love. It was a sacrifice. Kieran clutched her arm. "Elara, we have to go. Please." She met his gaze, her heart breaking at the terror in his eyes. He was just a boy, too young to carry this weight, too small to bear this war. And yet here he stood, refusing to leave her side. She cupped his cheek with her free hand. "Listen to me. You run. You run with them, through the gate, into the storm. Do not stop. Do not look back." His head shook violently. "No. Not without you." Her voice broke. "You must. Because if you don't, then everything they've given us, everything we've lost, means nothing." Tears mingled with the rain on his face. "I can't lose you, too." Elara's grip on the staff tightened. She pressed her forehead to his, just as she had before the fight began. "You won't," she whispered. "I'll always be with you. Even if you can't see me, I'll be in the fire. In the rain. In your courage." The scarred guard snarled, pulling back for a killing strike. Elara shoved Kieran toward the gate. "Run." And the boy, sobbing, obeyed. The scarred guard lunged. His blade slashed, sparks flying as Elara caught it with the staff. The impact drove her to her knees, her strength nearly gone. But in her eyes, he saw no fear. Only defiance. "You'll never chain us again," she whispered. And with a final cry, she twisted the chain around his arm and pulled with all her strength. Lightning struck above them, white fire splitting the sky. The yard burned in blood and fire. And Elara fought on, alone. The storm howled, swallowing screams and fire alike. Lightning split the sky, throwing jagged shadows across the compound. The walls were broken, the yard slick with blood, and yet the battle still burned. Kieran ran. Tears blurred his vision as he stumbled through mud, his small legs barely carrying him fast enough. Behind him, the sounds of war still echoed, chains clashing, whips cracking, Elara's voice roaring in the storm. He wanted to turn back, to find her, to throw himself into the fight at her side. But her words rang in his ears, sharper than any blade. "Run. Don't look back." And so he ran. Other survivors stumbled beside him, the farmer, limping but alive, dragging 2 children by the hands. A few others, wounded and battered, fled into the storm. But so many were gone. Too many. Kieran's chest heaved, his breath coming in ragged sobs. He clutched the memory of Elara's hand in his, the warmth of her forehead pressed to his, as if it were the only thing keeping his legs moving. Back in the yard, Elara fought alone. Her staff clashed with the scarred guard's blade again and again, each strike sending jolts of agony through her already wounded body. Her side burned, her arms screamed, and her strength was fading fast. But she did not yield. Not while even one of them still had a chance. The guard's eye blazed with fury. "Why do you keep fighting? You are finished." Elara spat blood into the mud. Her voice was hoarse, but it carried over the storm. "Because humans don't stop. Not for you. Not for anyone." She swung wide, her chain lashing across his scarred face. He roared, staggering, his grip faltering for the first time. Elara pressed forward, her whole body trembling with the effort. "This isn't about me," she said through clenched teeth. "It's about every soul you tried to break. Every voice you silenced. Every life you stole." Their weapons locked, sparks exploding in the rain. She forced his blade aside, her staff blazing brighter, the energy within it screaming as though alive. And with a cry that shook her very bones, she drove it forward. The staff pierced his chest. For one frozen moment, the scarred guard stared at her in disbelief. His weapon slipped from his hand, clattering into the mud. Then he fell to his knees, blood seeping through the shattered plates of his armor. "You," he rasped, his one good eye dimming, "are nothing." Elara leaned close, her breath hot against his maskless face. "Then remember this, nothing is what broke you." And with that, the light in his eye went out. The scarred guard collapsed, lifeless, into the mud. The yard was eerily quiet now. The remaining guards, seeing their champion fall, faltered. Some fled back toward the compound halls. Others were dragged down by the last of the captives, whose chains and fists struck with desperate fury. But Elara barely saw them. Her staff clattered to the ground as her knees gave way. Blood poured from her wounds, mixing with the rain. Her chest heaved, each breath shallow, ragged. She had won. But she was dying. Through the haze of pain, she heard voices, shouts echoing faintly from the broken gate. Survivors calling to one another, pushing into the storm. Among them, she thought she heard Kieran's cry. "Elara." Her heart clenched. She wanted to rise, to follow, to run with them into the storm. But her body betrayed her. Her limbs were heavy, her strength gone. She could only lift her head enough to see the silhouettes of the fleeing prisoners vanish into the rain. A smile tugged at her bloodied lips. They had made it. That was enough. She lay back in the mud, the storm washing over her. The rain was cold, but her chest burned with something warm, something fierce. She remembered the courtyard of her colony, the laughter of children, and the song at dusk. She remembered her brother's grin, the old woman's courage, the brother's sacrifice. And she remembered Kieran's eyes, the boy who would live because she had chosen to fight. Her whisper was lost in the storm. "Live, little one. Live for all of us." The thunder rolled on. And Elara's eyes closed. The survivors did not look back. The storm swallowed them, carrying them into the unknown. They were bruised, broken, hollowed by loss, but alive. The farmer limped at the front, his arm wrapped around two trembling children. Kieran ran beside him, his small fists clenched, his face streaked with tears and rain. Every step hurt. Every step was heavy with grief. But they did not stop. They carried Elara's fire with them, her defiance, her sacrifice, her unyielding will. And though the night was dark, though the universe was cruel, they carried with them something the Vedrak could never crush. Hope. Weeks later, among distant stars, whispers began to spread. Whispers of a rebellion, of slaves who had risen against their masters in the middle of a storm. Of a woman who had stood alone, staff blazing, against the cruelest of the Vedrak. Some said she still lived, carried away by the storm, waiting for the day she would rise again. Others said she died there in the mud, but her spirit lived on in every human who dared to fight back. It did not matter which was true. What mattered was the story. Because stories are stronger than chains. And this story, the story of Elara, who stood against cruelty, spread like fire. Across colonies, across ships, across the stars. Until one day, when the Vedrak came again, they found not silence and obedience. But fire is waiting for them.